Ryan, we are 2 weeks away from Tom Cruise saving the summer box office again in 2 years.
I hope so.
It's no secret that box office returns have been less than anticipated and or desired of late, as was the case last year. And then we got Top Gun Maverick, which made a gajillion dollars. This year, box office returns have been less than anticipated and or desired. And we get Mission Impossible 7, Dead Reckoning Part 1. The last 3 Mission Impossible films, in my humble opinion, it's one of the great 3-movie action arcs in recent cinema. Arguably, you can put it up with the stretch of the early Bonds when Spectre was your through line through a few consecutive films. And it tied it up nicely. And if we'd have never gotten Mission Impossible 7, it was a nice way to end a franchise, was Fallout. But we're getting at least 2 more, Dead Reckoning Part 1 and Dead Reckoning Part 2. Again, Christopher McQuarrie, Tom Cruise, ridiculous stunts, big action pieces. What do you think? Where were you coming in? What did you want? And what did you think of Dead Reckoning Part 1?
I think the first thing that I'm always surprised by, and I don't know why I'm always surprised by. You think I would get to it at some, I figured out, but there's Mission Impossible doesn't take itself as seriously as some other action films do.
Right.
It knows what it is, and occasionally we'll do the literal wink wink at you. I don't know if it's literal, but anyway, we'll kind of just acknowledge the fact that, look, we know this is ridiculous, but isn't it cool? Which I would also say kind of applies to John Wick, although John Wick, I think, is a far more serious. It takes itself far more seriously. This is a little more playful at times.
Yes.
But generally, I mean, I didn't dislike the first couple Mission Impossible films, but I mean, it was that the third leading into, and then particularly the fourth, fifth, and sixth films that were just so much fun. And just I don't know. I mean, just things that I absolutely love. And this film, we've only seen half the story, so right. I find it's a little hard for me to want to say anything definitive. This is right. Where this ranks, and almost I'm kind of at the point where I think we need to stop ranking things, and we can just. Did you enjoy it? Yes, I enjoyed it. Or where does it fit? Well, do I have to carve out a space specifically for it? Can I just recommend it and like it and or whatever?
No, you cannot.
We're obsessed with ranking things and, well, is it better than this? And I don't know, is it better than the last 3? Probably not, but you know what? The last 3, that's 3 movies.
Yeah.
That's not so, and some people are going to complain about this being a part 1.
As I did with Dune.
Sure. But
full disclosure.
Sure. But I mean, in a way, that last trilogy was parts 1 through 3.
Yeah.
They just gave it different titles, and I mean, and it wasn't as directly, I guess, part 1,
right.
2, part 3.
Those 3 were very much self-contained. This one is it's self-contained, but not nearly as cleanly.
No, and no, but how am I gonna, again, it's like, okay, but next year when I see the second half, is that going to have a lot of, and some films it wouldn't matter, like that second half doesn't matter, and I think, but for this one, I think that second half matters.
Yeah,
So, what I guess, I don't want to pass any definitive sort of, judgment on a half-told story, because this one really very much feels like that second half again. It matters more than for this film, it matters more than other films.
Right. It is in the Dune category where you get to the end of this one, and it's clear that you need that second half.
Yeah, and I mean,
not necessarily to the detriment of this film.
No,
Dune Part 1, but
or Fast X, or
that's true. Yes,
or Spider-Man. Which
this last across the universe, across the Spider-Verse.
Yeah. So I mean, they're all sort of there's lines being kind of blurred here, and whether or not they could have just called this something, the next part something different.
Right.
I guess, I think they probably, sensed in the way that we have is that this one was a little different. This one, you kind of have to say, no, this is a part one. Just, wait and see where we go.
Right. Right. Well, let's talk about the story on this one then. Dead Reckoning, of course, is a navigation term.
Yes.
For navigating without instruments. It's bearing speed and time. Used forever. Used in the submarine community a lot, which is where this movie starts, and that's all I'll say about that. But it is, you don't have satellite navigation. You don't have any of that. It's blind navigation, effectively, which is perfect for this film. Because this is actually, and if you were really upset about, much like Roger Moore's Bond becoming too gimmick dependent or gadget dependent, if you were getting upset maybe on the last few films, it was always a mask this, a hack that. This film really feels closer to the first film in terms of what they can do and have available than any of the ones since.
Sure.
Because the digital world is what is has been taken away in this film. Yeah, the entire digital cyberverse is gone. And so it harkens back to Avengers Age of Ultron, when Tony Stark asked Hawkeye, would Natasha get a word to you any other way? Old school spy stuff. And that's kind of where they find themselves, the IMF team. That's kind of where they find themselves in this film, is they're having to use, analog earpieces, which don't have satellite relay capability. So they don't go as far. They're not as reliable. There's this, there's that. They can't just plug into a mainframe and hack the thing or the other thing. I think that the nice thing about this is that as patently ridiculous as the Mission Impossible threats always seem to be, this is the one that feels closest to where we are.
Well, and I wrote some stuff about today, kind of the, sketch out things. And this is the sort of like silly plot that in the 80s, it would have been like, yeah, that's, it's interesting, but there's no way.
Right.
And now, but 30 years later, whatever, it's like, oh yeah, this could happen. Oh, this is kind of slipped out of science fiction mode, where, technology run amok, to where I think there's probably some of us who are like, oh, I fully expect an AI takeover attempt.
Right.
At some point.
If you were concerned about Skynet.
Yes.
For Terminator 2, if that was your fear, this movie is going to make you more realistically unsettled.
And again, I mean, there's that part that says, yeah, it's ridiculous, but
is it?
But is it? And that's the thing that's a little terrifying, I think, about it is, and for me, and I think, so initially it's like, ha, okay, funny, I get it, funny. And then like, oh, wait, I get it, not so funny.
Yeah.
So the way everything is connected, and how everything is easily accessible technology-wise by technology. It's the paranoia of Kafka, of anyone who ever kind of looked at the course of mankind and said, we might be in trouble here.
It is, yeah, sure. This kind of Kafka-esque. There's a little Brazil in here.
Yes.
There's old school Mission Impossible, TV show feel to it. There's just straight up good spy stuff, again, because they're throttled back to people, not stuff, in a lot of ways. So we get to see, we get to see, the evils of the technology, if you will, but like every good movie, underpinned by the evils of the people, because literally the world is at stake. And rather than saving the world, everyone is still trying to figure out how to control what they all agree is the end of humanity.
Yeah.
And it's like people again. People suck. Sure.
And so then it presents that crazy idea of is there a part of you that hopes they lose? Who are you rooting for in this? And it gets even more complicated as it goes. But who are you? Who are you rooting for? Ethan and his team, and are they even rooting for their? It's just kind of a strange, where they all kind of find themselves in a position where it's like, well, this is kind of what we do. But is what we do, is the status quo still the status quo?
Right.
Do we long for a simpler time when, evil was seemingly easier to define?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there's some compelling stuff going on in this film, but again, it's a fun action film.
It is. Again, it maintains. I said it last year. I hated to say it, but God bless Tom Cruise. When he makes a movie, he is one of the few people still making movies to entertain his audience. He goes, this is what the guys that are plunking down money for tickets want to see. Now, how can I do that in a way that's rewarding for himself?
Exactly. How do I give it that mass appeal, but not make it redundant, and had to try to bring something new, to what I'm doing, which is just it's kind of fascinating to me, because the first couple Mission Impossible films were essentially Tom Cruise wanting to be James Bond.
Yeah,
which was never what Mission Impossible was, because Mission Impossible was about a team.
Right.
And Bond has, I guess you could argue that he has sort of teammates, but those teammates are very much on the fringe. Yeah. They don't necessarily factor into the big epic scene, because ultimately it comes down to, well, is James Bond going to be able to pull it off? Whereas Mission Impossible, again, it wasn't just about the one person. But initially, it kind of felt like the Mission Impossible films were about Tom Cruise and not really anybody else.
Right.
We're not that place anymore. It's not that. And so it's kind of this, I don't know if Tom had a change of heart, got smart, realized, I don't know what, but it's absolutely some sort of ideological shift to what Mission Impossible is.
But hey, look, if you enjoy what you're seeing and hearing on the Visually Stunning Movie Podcast, why not take a second to click subscribe if you're on YouTube, click follow wherever you're listening to us, follow us on Twitter at VS Movie Podcast, same over on Facebook. If you're on Instagram, it's Visually Stunning Movie Podcast. That would be awesome for us. We appreciate you listening, and now let's get back to the show. Well, and they've been hammering that mindset home. I mean, implicitly and explicitly over the last couple films.
Yeah.
You know, how it's, you know, he won't sacrifice his team for, you know, the mission or whatever. You know, it is very much, he's very people. Ethan Hunt has become very people centric.
Yeah.
In terms of the overall mission, he would delay mission accomplishment or gamble the mission on a person. And again, in this film, that becomes, I mean, they just spell it out for you.
Yeah.
In so many ways. But he understands, you know, you can make the argument that Keanu Reeves in the John Wick series does the same thing. He made one movie that I think he thought was going to be fun, and then they decided to make more, and he looked at it and the director looked at it and they agreed of the approach they needed to take going forward. So he puts in the same amount of work for what he does as John Wick as Tom Cruise does in terms of stunting out Mission Impossible, because he does as much of that as he can. And so to keep that tangible look and that visceral feel that you're watching the hero, not an action piece. And I think both those franchises do that really well. And like I said, we both love the Wickian universe and the world that it's built. And I think they take the same approach and give us two different outputs.
Yeah, and it's funny because you could argue that there are a couple scenes in both the latest John Wick and this film that sort of, I don't want to say mirror each other, but yeah, the similar influence.
Yeah.
You know, it's like they both read a book and took an aspect of it and kind of made it their own or whatnot. But at the same time, they're radically different. Like you wouldn't confuse the one film with the other, really. At least
you can't. It's weird. They're stylistically different. They're tonally different, but their mindset is exactly the same.
Yes. You know, and it's like their audience to a certain degree is very similar. Or, you know, if you like the one, there's a good chance you're going to like the other.
But for completely different reasons.
Well, yeah, I mean, because I don't view John Wick necessarily as a straightforward blockbuster film. Mm-hmm. Like it's close, and you could argue, well, it's become one because it's close. But I would argue that the Mission Impossible film is the mainstream, you know, film. But that's not, and that shouldn't be viewed as a negative thing.
No, thank you. Because we've talked about, so people are like, you know, a film is a flop if it doesn't make money, or a film is a hit if it does make money, and it's like, no, those two things are not mutually exclusive. You can make a lot of money with a bad movie and make no money, but have a really good film.
Yeah.
Mission Impossible tends to make more money because it is in most conventional ways has a wider appeal for an audience than, say, a John Wick does. John Wick has a wide appeal mostly because of Keanu, not necessarily because of that up close combat violence stuff. Tom Cruise has that wide audience appeal, but the action is more accessible. The scale is more accessible because it does feel more James Bond than John Wick, but it is clearly not a Bond franchise. It might have been. You're right. It might have tried to go there, much like Bourne did.
Yeah.
But there's a reason Bourne fizzled out.
Well, but also Bourne changed the course of the James Bond films. Without Bourne, we don't get the Daniel, you know, Craig James Bond. I just don't think that happens. So I mean, but it's so they all kind of, and you know, and the last John Wick film did incredibly well financially.
Right.
So. I think part of the thing that made the John Wick special is it was unexpectedly smart.
Yeah.
And I think I still think the Mission Impossible films are pretty smart. But I don't think they're What? I don't think
they don't try to outsmart the audience.
Yeah,
I guess they never try to fool you. I mean, it's still a spy mystery, so they can't just tell you everything. But they never just lie to you, and they never Agatha Christie you.
Yeah.
There's no M. Night Shyamalan twist ending here in a Mission Impossible film. You can see everything and have a good guess going in, and you'll probably be 50-50 coming out, in those films, if you watched them. So, but that's okay. You shouldn't be, your mental faculties should not be trying to parse the clues at the end of the film. You should be on the edge of your seat for the action that's getting you there to the end of the film. And then just kind of appreciate that ending that they give you. It's a different approach. You're not trying to solve the mystery.
Yeah, so and I think I would say we talk about comparing things, and is it apple to oranges or whatever. Well, I think these are both I think Mission Impossible and John Wick are apples. They're both apples.
Yeah,
but anyone who knows apples, there's a whole lot of different flavor in those apples. Right. It's not like there's just one apple. So, there are so many different versions of the apple and so many mixes and hybrids and whatever that ultimately I feel like this is a good apple.
Yes.
And that's, and John Wick is a good apple, and they're not the same apple, but they both go great with caramel or whatever. I don't know.
Right.
But, it's just a different kind of apple, and I think there is a thrill to it. There is a sense of, and it's crazy that we're 7 films into a franchise, and there's a sense of I don't know who's going to survive. Like just
right?
the idea that you were in a position and you feel like, they could actually, do something here that shocks everybody, and maybe they do and maybe they don't. You'll have to see the film, but
and just because they do or don't in this film doesn't mean they will or won't in the next film.
Yes, I mean it's like it's all fair game.
Yeah,
that's bizarre. That is, I mean, I can't think of, and again, I don't think the franchise could have been that 10 years ago, but somehow it's ended up there. And that's just so compelling to me that you can change the identity of or the perception of what you're doing over a short period of time so radically.
Yeah.
And I and again, how did that happen? I don't know. Was it it has happened. I guess that's about all of that I absolutely have to know.
Yeah. Just accept it and be thankful for it, because otherwise we might have been stuck with Mission Impossible 2s for 3 or 4 more films.
Which, and look, I love John Woo, but there's the whole idea that the Mission Impossibles were going to be like, let's showcase a hot director, or something. I guess Brian De Palma. John Woo, J.J. Abrams. It was kind of like, let's team, who's the dream team that we can kind of get Tom Cruise and team them up with and make this, and it was almost like that was bigger than the movies themselves, but that's not how it is at all.
How many dream team movies have been complete disasters? How many? I mean, just Hollywood is littered with can't miss team up, director, writer, actor combos that just fail miserably.
Well, and I think it's that idea of we really don't want what we think we want.
Right. But then you stop and think about the directors that. Or the films that seem to consistently work. Stop thinking, Wes Anderson and his cast of characters.
Mm.
They get together, they do their thing, and in that little world, all of that stuff is what works, and it moves on. Scream changes directors, but always in the construct of that formula. So they seem to do well and continue to move on. But it's never, oh, we're going to bring in director X to do this Scream. You bring, okay, the day they announce Sam Raimi is going to do a Scream, I'm going to have a problem, because then that tells me they will have jumped the shark. Not because I don't love Sam Raimi, I do. But in that instance, no. Yeah. You have to find the things that work. And sometimes that means you keep a director and you keep a star that want to work together, even if you have to wait a little longer for the thing that is going to just kick complete ass. And so that's one of those things. It took 30 years for Top Gun Maverick. But that was a very, Tom Cruise held that one down. He didn't let that one get parted out and just come in and star in it. He drove so much of it after Tony Scott. So, but so you have to look at that way. So, and then John Wick, you got Keanu Reeves and a stunt guy director. Nobody would have called that. No one would have assumed that would become what it did.
Well, and it wasn't supposed to.
But here we are.
Yeah.
Because it just worked. Something in that thing worked. Sometimes TV shows work that way. It's like, that TV show, this TV show is going to hit. No, it's not. And if you look at another TV show, you're like, there's no way that show is going to work. Somehow that show works. And it's just a thing. So yeah, people are good at it, but they need to stop trying to make it happen and just try to make a good product. And if that means going with director B instead of A, or writer C instead of B, or getting sometimes the unexpected star, the unexpected actor, the unexpected character in your script is what turns that film and or franchise around. Mission Impossible, they found that cast, that group, that team. We got Simon Pegg, we got Ving Rhames. I'm shocked. I'm wondering if we might see another rebound in the next film that we didn't see in this one, because I think he's still alive. Yeah, he's still alive. So it'll be interesting to see. We had a callback in Dead Reckoning Part 1 to the first film that he shows up. You're like, oh yeah, that guy. Yeah. So but somehow Mission Impossible just became a franchise that started one way, veered in a direction, and caught themselves early, going, maybe not. And so they came back toward where they were. They got a little bigger, and this one brings them, but in a good way. They got bigger, and they found the thing that works. So this film keeps those essentials and really does scale it back in a lot of ways in what we're looking at. So it's a smaller movie, even though it is in a lot of ways just as big as those previous three. It feels a little more intimate, I think. I think because they are in such close proximity by necessity, just because of the backup or the basis of the storyline. So I think it is an interesting thing to see how the franchise has evolved into what it is. And this is a good, great movie, and I'll be interested to see how they wrap it up. And do they just wrap up the duology here, or do they wrap up the franchise? I know they don't want to wrap up the franchise, but they might wrap it up in a way that they can go back in 5 or 6 years and reboot.
Well, and I don't know. I don't even know that it would be a reboot, because I think at this point, and again, this is completely opposite of how it started. You can bring in certain new characters and continue it on in a way that feels organic. Even if that means you're going to miss, or certain characters are going to disappear that you never thought would disappear. Yeah. Almost, this is, the brand is stronger than the the pieces. I don't.
Yeah.
I don't know. But it's in an interesting place that again, I don't think any of us ever foresaw it getting to, but are thrilled that that's where it is.
Yep, 100%. So this is an easy recommend for just about anybody.
Unless if you hate these movies,
Yeah, if you're not a fan of the franchise, then yeah, don't bother.
If you don't like spy thriller or action films, and
probably not for you.
No, it's probably not for you.
Probably not for you. 2 hours and 43 minutes though. Mm. So steel yourself for part 1 at nearly 3 hours. That will be. I'm wondering how long part 4 will be. Or part 2 will be. So we'll see how long.
Yeah.
Well, as long as it needs to be, but it'll be 2.5 minimum. Just because otherwise they would have cut this differently, I think. So, yeah. So that's a go. So Paramount is two big movies in 3 weeks. We had Indiana Jones last week, and we have this one on the 21st of July.
We had Transformers too.
And we had Transformers. Paramount's been shotgunning with the blockbusters, the presumed blockbusters. This is the easiest one to predict will not disappoint at the box office.
I hope not.
I can't fathom a world in which this one doesn't just not make $110 million on opening weekend.
I don't have a lot of faith in the world. I don't have a lot of faith in the world. That's my problem.
Oh, is that what it is? You don't trust people?
No. You work in news and cover politics and everything long enough. You realize that sometimes people are going to fail you.
Yeah, that's true.
I hope that doesn't work. I hope that people go out and see this one. I hope that that there is some sort of Top Gun carryover.
I anticipate that. I actually will probably, because the screening I went to was not IMAX.
Correct. Yeah.
I think I want to go see this in IMAX. So there'll probably be a trip to an IMAX on this one.
I could. Yeah.
So there you go. But hail, the gang's all here. Tom Cruise, Rebecca Ferguson, Ving Rhames, Simon Pegg, Haley Atwell is in. Actually, I was surprised by her character. It was not what I was thinking coming in. But it works. Vanessa Kirby is back.
I love Vanessa Kirby.
Pom Clemente is in. Shea Wiggum, highly underappreciated character actor, is in this. Carrie Elwes is in this. And Isai Morales. How I didn't even mention him as our bad guy.
Well, yeah, is he the bad guy though?
He's an antagonist to Ethan Hunt. You're right, because his motivations are still kind of unclear.
I don't. Yeah, I'm not entirely, which is nice. It's okay.
Yeah, he is not on Tom Cruise's side.
No,
but I don't know that makes him a quote unquote bad guy. Maybe a second viewing I'll change my opinion. But he's definitely in an antagonistic role in this one.
He is a foe.
He is a foe. You are correct. So yeah, it's great cast. Like I said, the action pieces are big. The car chases, you'll see a very familiar one from a previous Paramount release this year. Except there's no rolling bomb. Yeah, it's a lot of stuff. And the car chase around the Arc de Triomphe, which we saw in another movie this year. So yeah, good stuff. Definitely, yeah, but easy recommend on Dead Reckoning Part 1. Absolutely. Also coming out this month, same weekend, I believe, unless they moved them in the last 2 days, Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer and Greta Gerwig's Barbie, one of which we are being allowed to screen beforehand. And one we are not being screened in this area beforehand. That's all I have to say about that. I have my theories on that phenomenon. So, but anyway, we'll definitely talk about one of those before it comes out, and maybe the other one after it comes out. We'll have to see how that works. So, Lord, land of Goshen, craziness. Well, Ryan, that's all we're going to talk about on Mission Impossible tonight. If you're out there listening, when you watch this film, please let us know what you think of it, how you think it stacks up against the previous three, where you think it's going to go in part 2. Don't forget to like us, follow us on social media. You know how that works. Share us with your friends if you like what you hear and what you read. And until next time, I am Mark. That is Ryan. Bye, Ryan. And we will talk to everyone later. Bye-bye.